Good evening again. A few housekeeping rules before we begin. A quick reminder to please sign in using your full name. If you have any questions during the session, feel free to raise your hand or write them in the chat. Please mute your mics. Thank you. Mr. Truss, you could proceed.
Good evening. Good evening all. Madam Moderator, could I have permission to share my screen, please?
Yes.
Has everybody seen my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we
Beautiful.
can.
Beautiful. And everybody is seeing my face up in the corner as well, right?
Yes, sir.
Just to make sure it's me. I want to take this opportunity to welcome at this time all 94 of you. And I want to say to you that tonight should be a robust discussion at the end of the presentation. Now, just want to let you know that the topic is building and maintaining protected structures. I don't expect any of you by the end of this session to be able to build and maintain a protected structure, but at least you would have a good appreciation of what happens during the construction phase, the building and maintenance of the protected structures. And I think the Helen's Daughters did protected structures and mentioned protected structures just so that we cover greenhouses, shade houses, and any building that is used for growing plants. So protected structures, or sometimes you would see PA, covers the greenhouses, covers shade houses, and sometimes you may want to take it a step further. And the ground cover that farmers are now presently using could be classified as protected structures, although not, enclosing the entire plant, but it protects the root of the plant and it holds moisture into the soil. So technically, that can be classified as well as protected structures to some extent. Now, what we're looking at here is a project that I was fortunate enough to do for the Elizabeth Pemberton Primary School in Nevis. If you would realize, it's a shade house. It's all shade, shade on the side, shade on the top. And the Helen's Daughters sign is erected directly in front of the structure. Now, this shade house is 20 feet by 30 feet, the width by the length. And the purpose of this greenhouse really is to get the children involved in farming on a more technological, in a more technological space than normal farming. It provides food for the kitchen. They do a lot of short crops in it. Usually they're doing 2 crops per term. Each one is about 6 weeks. So they do lettuce, kale, string beans, and generally short crops. I haven't seen them do any cucumbers because, the space is kind of limited. And what they can't sell, what they can't use in the kitchen, sometimes they sell to parents and they take to the marketing division for agriculture here in Nevis. Now, this has been such an inspiration for them that they've even opened a separate bank account for produce that is coming from the shade house there at the Elizabeth Pemberton Primary School. So thanks to Helen's Daughters and the donation, I think the school has set a very good standard, and most schools in Nevis are now interested in this kind of farming at their schools. All right, so that was just by the way. So just almost like an icebreaker before we get into the meat of the matter. So protected structures, building and maintaining. And by way of introduction, let me divert a little bit, but I would tell you that in St. Kitts and Nevis, and by extension throughout the region, the use of protected structures, greenhouse, shade houses, have been gaining popularity, especially as a tool to combat the effects of climate change and to allow farmers the option to farm on a year-round basis. The idea is, no matter what the outside conditions are, you're still able to go inside the greenhouse and do what you have to do. For example, a day like today, we here in Nevis have a storm passing through, and it was raining. Has been raining since morning, and at A1 Farms, when I went 8 o'clock, and the guys were already there inside the greenhouse, cleaning out and getting ready for planting a new crop of cucumbers tomorrow. I think later on, I took a shot of a picture of the cucumber seedlings, and I should be able to show you those as this course continues. So in the previous session, which was introduction to greenhouses, we looked at the greenhouse in its various types by structures, design, roof type, usage, and covering, and the material that covers it. This is how we kind of classify them. Shape of the roof, I remember the A shape and the half moon and so on. So we explored the advantages and the disadvantages of farming inside the greenhouse and the crops that perform best and would bring us the highest returns on our investment. Generally speaking, the cost of the greenhouse and the setting up of the greenhouse is a very costly venture. And so you want to maximize your return on your investment. And to do that, we have found over the years that what we call the cash crops give you the highest returns in the greenhouse for the greenhouse environment. And we went through the different crops, like the lettuce, well, leafy greens on a whole, tomatoes, bell peppers, cucumbers, and so on. So in today's session, we are going to spend some time discussing the construction, the maintenance of the protected structures, mainly zeroing on the ones that are used in our region. So we won't be really talking about glass houses and those fully plastic houses that really can't work in our environment. I just brought them in the initial session such that we have an appreciation of what is out there in the market. I've put some learning objectives together. So by the end of this building and maintenance lecture, and discussion, we should realize or have an appreciation of the startup capital and how we go about determine what the startup capital should look like, how you plan for the greenhouse, the different stages of construction for the protected structures, the covering materials. We touch a little bit on the ventilation and the temperature control, environmental control as well. Water and irrigation, very, very important. Seed selection, like we mentioned before, that's important as well, the growing media. Plant spacing, very, very important. And we would have a little discussion on the challenges and some solutions that I've put together that I think are relevant for this lecture. The general management of the structure and I should have enough time to speak a little bit about the crop, because the structure is no good until it has crops in there to produce to bring back our return on the investment. So let's talk a little bit about the investment capital. And I've taken a little twist to this, in that I've broken it down into some tangible things that you could relate to when one is looking at building a greenhouse. And the first thing that came to my mind is we would need some land, whether that land is a space in our backyard, in terms of commercial farming, land that we lease, land that we own, family land, land that is put up by government or some agency like Helen's Daughters. But we have to consider land and how much land we have. That would basically determine how big a project we can do. And even if we start small, how much expansion is afforded to us on that piece of land. Now, the contour of the land is important as well, and we'll get to that in a later stage. Fencing and security, very important, because you really don't want to put that big investment out there and it's just there that everybody could walk in and trespass on the property. And, you know, a lot of inquisitive people, they see a new building going up, they're not familiar with the greenhouses. And so maybe just by way of, as we say locally, looking some news, they walk into your property and start to do things that aren't so pleasing to you. The cost of the materials and the fact that in a lot of the jurisdiction, the material is not readily available. Although sometimes we could use, for simple structures, we could use what is available, such as bamboo, especially in SVG. I realized when I was there, there's a lot of bamboo. So that is one of the consideration as well for materials and lowering the cost. It would not be as sexy looking as some other greenhouses, but we're talking about something that would really do the job at a lower cost, because sometimes we know that there are cost constraints. We have to look at labor, whether we were or we are capable of doing the construction ourselves, or would have to employ somebody to do the construction, and the labor costs in the different region. So we have to factor all of that as part of the investment capital. In terms of labor going into the greenhouse as well, so I just put on production, construction and production, because even if you're the one running the greenhouse after, there should be some costing for your labor. And that is the only way that you would find out exactly how much it takes to run this particular project. The utilities, we have to factor that in mind as well, because once we're running a greenhouse, a protected structure, we would, in a lot of cases, require some form of electricity. We would definitely need water. And so we would have to factor in these type of things: the cost of seeds, cost of maintenance, not only the building, but I know I mentioned it earlier, but maintenance meaning looking after the plants as well. So maintaining the structure both physically and on the plant side. Storage in terms of your fertilizer, your equipment, and then of course, you may need some storage space for your produce once you reap it, because you might not be able to sell all of it. So you have to take all of that into consideration. And the dry storage is not too bad, but when you get to a level where you require cold storage for your produce, then that can be costly. So all of these are factors that I want you to bear in mind that you'd have to think about and put on paper. Just don't think about them, put them on paper and try to fix a costing, a proper costing to them so that you know whether or not you're going or you're coming at the end of the day, whether or not you're able to afford the project at hand. The location is of paramount importance. And ideally, you should be looking at an area minimum 500 feet above sea level. The higher you go, the better it is. Because the science shows that for every 100 feet in elevation above sea level, the temperature drops by 0.6 degrees Celsius. So for example, if you're up, say 600 feet above sea level, then you're 6 degrees cooler than, not 6 degrees, you're 3 degrees cooler, sorry, than someone who is down at sea level. And so the higher you go, the lower the temperature. For those of us who like to hike and go on the mountains, we realize that the mountain tops are much, much cooler than when we are at our houses or in town, for example. But because we're located close to the equator, the orientation, the location is one thing, but then once you've established the location, then you have to think about the orientation of the protected structure as well. Most of the literature that you would read or come across would suggest that you would locate or orient the greenhouse from a north to south direction. But the fact is, because we're close to the equator and the sun is with us for at least 8 hours a day, we really don't have to worry too much about the orientation as it relates to the sunshine. What becomes more important is the orientation according to the wind direction, because we want to have as much airflow as possible. Having said that though, you still don't want to have the greenhouse in a location where you get gusty winds 24/7, because that over time could undermine the protected structures. So I say that with a little caveat on it. So in terms of the orientation, to me, that is a little bit more important than the, well, let me back up a little bit. The north to south orientation is not that critical because of the amount of sunlight and sunshine we get here in the tropics. We want to be able to locate the greenhouse though in an area that is not shaded. Sometimes when you go by, say, gut side, there's a lot of tall trees. So you want to be at least 25 feet away from the taller trees all around the greenhouse, because what you're trying to do is minimize the shading. The shade cloth or the netting and the plastic would have, in most cases, adequate shading for the plants, because remember, most of these plants need full sun. What the plastic does, it really diffuses the light such that the rays are not concentrated and are more dispersed once it enters the protected structure, so that the plant get lights evenly. Sometimes what we find happening is that if there's shading, the plants start to grow tall, trying to find that sunlight. We spoke a little bit about the wind protection. If you're in a very windy area, then is when you're gonna need the wind barriers. You still don't want them too close to the greenhouse itself for shading, but as a windbreaker, that would work. We have to look and take into consideration accessibility. You have to get to the greenhouse. You have to get from the greenhouse. So some kind of road structure should be there, or you would have to make preparations for that. Doesn't make sense for you to be investing and then you can't move freely back and forth. If a storm comes, the road is so bad that you can't go and pick your produce, you can't go and look after your plants. Maybe by the time the storm is over, there's nothing to look after. So you have to have proper access. Water is critical. And it's so critical that I would say here that the availability of water all year round really should be one of the deciding factors on the size of the greenhouse, because it really can't make any sense for us to have a massive structure and can't support it with water. Water is very essential. And remember, for the greenhouse itself, the roof is covered. So the onus is on you to provide clean, fresh water to those plants. And so if we don't have water in a particular location, we could take a chance with farming outdoors, but we can't take a chance with farming in a protected structure, period. Really doesn't make sense. Now, electricity may not be so critical, because what I've done successfully at the Elizabeth Pemberton Primary School is, but this is a smaller structure, so I put a caveat on that as well, is being able to erect a tank uphill, 1,000-gallon tank. We fill that with water and we gravity feed down to the shade house. And that works fine. The pressure is really, really good, because we have maybe about a 15 feet drop from where the tank is located. The tank is about, I would say about 75 feet from the greenhouse itself, but the greenhouse is downhill, and we had to excavate and level an area and put the shade house there. So we have a good drop, and so we're able to get away without electricity because we're gravity fed. We want to be able to secure the materials that we're going to use to build the greenhouse. Like I alluded to earlier, most of the materials for the greenhouses, the netting, the steel pipes, the PVC pipes, aluminum pipes, if we so choose, most of those are imported materials. Now, we have to make sure that we could procure those before we start the project. Doesn't make any sense to start the project and realize, hey, I'm out of uprights for the last section. You can't go any further because you need to do the full framing before you could start to cover. The other thing is you have to secure markets. You have to do your marketing and at least get some promissory notes so that when you bring in 500 pounds of cucumber to the market, you have no problems getting them off. Because one of the things you don't want to do as a farmer is having to spend all day selling your produce. That's not the aim. You're better suited on your farm. So you do your marketing, and then in my mind, it's easier to get a wholesale price and then get back to what you do best, and that is to farm and produce, than to have to sell all day, be in the market all day just to get your produce off. Even if you have to team up with somebody else to sell the produce for you, unless you reach a stage where you have so much, the operation is so extensive that you could afford to have a dedicated personnel to market and sell the produce. Sorry about that, getting ahead of myself. The size and scale of the greenhouse or protected structure really depends on, and I think we went through this before, but I'll stress on it. it really depends on what you want to do. If you're just a hobbyist or doing something for your family, then you could find a little space in your backyard and so on. But if you're really planning to do this like I did on a commercial scale, then you have to look at adequate land space where the space is, at a good elevation, enough space for you to expand if you so desire, or if the market take a likeness to your produce, and so on. So these are things that you have to bear in mind, and I like to say, put on paper, because sometimes we think we have it covered, and by the time we start now, we realize, hey, we missed a critical step. So you put it on paper, you go over it this morning, you go over it tomorrow morning, the next morning, and like my father used to say, you sleep on it a few times. Oh, having done some planning and you're comfortable now with the size of protected structure that you want to undertake, we've got a couple of stages that I think that is very important that we go through. Just like you're building a house, you got your foundation stage. And now the foundation really depends on the budget, the size of the structure, the location, and so on. For example, and I'll show you a little later, at A1 Farms, we are maybe about 600 and something feet above sea level. But the land that I had was sloping land. And so I had to do a lot of excavation. But it was better for me to do that there than soliciting the agriculture department for leased land, because that was close enough to my property and all the amenities were there. The water was already there. The electricity was already there. The internet was already there. And the land was mine. So it was a trade-off that I had to make. So I just throw that out there so could get your minds thinking a little bit. Now, back to the foundation. What we want to do ideally, especially if it's a commercial structure, is to have a good foundation. The stronger the foundation, the stronger the structure you're able to put together. And we all know that we're in the tropics and we're prone to storms, just like the one we're getting today, although it's a rainstorm. Storms, hurricanes, and just extreme weather conditions. And so we need to concentrate on a good foundation. What I would recommend is a concrete footing going all the way around the perimeter for the commercial size greenhouses. And then you pour the upright, you put the uprights in poured concrete. The inner portion, which is the floor that you're going to plant on later on, you want some kind of material that would soak away the water in the event that you've got a ruptured irrigation pipe. You got some torrential rain and you get runoffs that go inside the greenhouse for some reason. So you want something that would soak away the water, because you really don't want to have any kind of water log inside there. And you don't want too much moisture at any given time either, because too much moisture would then, as you know, it would attract fungi and you get fungal diseases and maybe some bacteria and all of that. So you want to have good drainage. And so I spoke about the importance of the solid foundation, proper drainage considerations. So if we're not able to afford the poured concrete going right around the perimeter, what we'll have to do is dig and maintain proper drainage around the perimeter of the greenhouse or protected structure, such that if we get heavy rainfall, the rainfall goes down in the drain, in the gutters, and then find its way apart, away, find its way away from the protected structure. We don't want any seepage, any leakages. We don't want a gut inside there. We just want it to be properly drained at all times. This is construction area. I alluded to that the land was very, very sloping, and you could realize when you look at this picture off to the right, you see all those stones? That's a retaining wall because we had to excavate to get below flat enough to do a proper foundation. And so we had to excavate. First, we excavated the top. At the top, we had enough space for two greenhouses, two full-size greenhouses. And right where in front of us, what we're looking at is another space there for a full-size greenhouse. Now, the one straight ahead behind the bus, that one was, it's not full-size, it's probably 42 feet wide by 55 feet long. But that's all that the land would accommodate on that other side. So that's what we had to do. Now, in terms of accessibility, we've got right where the bus is, you could drive right up between the all of the houses, so easy access. You'd realize in the foundation on the left-hand side, we put some pipes into the blocks, and those pipes, the reason for that is that if we have, once we fill the foundation with gravel or sand, and we started planting, if for any reason we had any leaks, any major leaks, then the pipes would just drain the water from inside the greenhouse to someplace outside. And so this picture is showing the poured concrete on the footing, and we ran a couple of row blocks just in case we had torrential rains. It's high up enough off the ground level that no water would enter. Okay. This is a different picture, and I think we could appreciate now the existing greenhouse says on the top. We see the uprights, we see the roof, and we see all the netting going around. The picture off to the left, you could appreciate the foundation and the way we bring the foundation up off the ground such that we get a good level. Plus, we don't have chances of ever flooding inside. Now that picture off to the left, inside you would see some benches and some channels. That particular greenhouse there is a hydroponics house. So whereas the one behind the mixer has pots in it, and the pots would have soil, and we plant in soil, the one to the left is one of hydroponics. The one to the left, I may tell you that one there is not from A1 Farms. That's from Paris Leafy Greens, and he's a good friend of mine, so he allowed me to use this picture. So we've done the foundation, and so we go now to frame the greenhouse. We alluded to the framing a little bit earlier, and remember last lecture we were talking about the different materials. So whether it be lumber, metal piping, aluminum piping, PVC, most of these materials are imported into the region. And so we would want to make sure that there's adequate materials to be had before we start. The assembling techniques, most of the ones that I've done or I've seen are bolted together. I've seen some that are welded. The problem with the welding is that there's not enough play. It's too rigid. And so in bad weather conditions, it doesn't give. So it's easier for the storms to break it down. So it's better bolted with screws and bolts, nuts and bolts, sorry. And that in itself give it a little bit of sway. And I find that it's even faster than the welding. You would want to consult a certified contractor and have some good laborers to do stage 2 to make sure that the frame is done properly. Because most of these commercial greenhouses are made to certain specifications, you can't be more than, I would tell you, maybe half an inch off in terms of the plumbing, meaning your walls have to be upright and straight and be by specific measurements, because that upright have to hook into something else. And if it's off, then you would have some problems, all right? Because once it's set in concrete, it's hard to straighten up and it's a real nightmare. So you gotta get it done right. Sometimes people come and they say, well, listen, yeah, I could do it for this and I could do it for that, but they really don't have any experience. You'd prefer pay $10 extra and get it done right than having some real headaches at your hand later on. In terms of the sidewall, meaning the uprights that you're seeing there, in the commercial greenhouse, and even with the shade houses, you want to have a minimum of 10 feet up off the ground. And that allows you to get adequate airflow. If it's too low, then it traps the heat inside there, and it really gets uncomfortable, not only for you, but for the plants as well. We spoke about the different designs in the roof, and usually the roof goes maybe about 4 or 5 feet above the sidewalls, and are usually covered with plastic in our region. We have the standard size plastic would come 36 feet by about 102 feet. And you want it in one sheet so that you could pull it right over the greenhouse and lock it into place. You really don't want to have to start to patch it, because what happens when you start to overlap it, you get a good storm and it gets under the plastic and it just rip it like a child ripping paper. So you want to run from that, stay away from that, and get a full, whatever your dimension is, you get enough plastic to make one go over, or one haul, as we would say locally. 6 mil, that refers to the thickness of the plastic, and that's usually standard. There's 4, 6, 8. The higher you go, the stronger the plastic gets. But 6 mil, I find, once you pull it and you pull it tight, a guy 175, 200 pounds could walk on the plastic, no problem at all. That's after you stretch it over the roof. So the plastic is the 6 mil plastic is very, very durable. I've seen some plastic now that they're making, and they got some really, really good properties in them. They're not gonna tear easy. They diffuse the light much better and cut out a lot of the radiation and so on. And some of these plastic, the antithermic plastic, I think that technology comes out of Spain, and I haven't used it, but it said that by employing that plastic, you'd be lowering your temperature inside the greenhouse by 6 degrees Celsius, which is a big, big deal, especially nowadays with the kind of heat wave we've been having. Now, we have to pay special attention to the installation of the plastic. It's clearly marked. There's a side that you would put up, and there's a side, obviously, that would go down. Now, what happens here is that the properties in the plastic has anti-dust and light diffusion properties, but it must be oriented properly for it to work. Once you've got your structure in place, you've got your foundation, you've got your framing already done, then the last thing to do to complete the greenhouse structure is really to cover it. And you would cover starting with the roof for obvious reasons. You want to get that roof nice and tight. And usually once you're done with the roof, you really don't have to go back up there. All right, so you've got your plastic in place, you lock it in place, make sure it's nice and tight. And then you really don't have the sides to worry about if you have to go back up and pull it a little tighter. So you get the plastic on, you pull it nice and tight, make sure you're done with it, then you take your scaffolding down, and then you're ready to put on the insect netting going around. Remember, we can't use plastics on the sides here because it would keep the interior of the greenhouse entirely too hot and would not allow for movement of air. All right, those are for cold climates. Usually what we use is a 50 mesh net around the sidewalks. Of late, there's some research being done on a 22 mesh. Basically, what's the difference is that the 50 mesh, the higher the number, is the closer the mesh is knitted. So the 50 mesh is tighter than the 22 mesh. The 22 mesh would allow a little bit more airflow. And I think what I've been reading is that it would keep out down to the white flies as well. So I would like to try that, but I haven't seen my suppliers carrying that one yet, because especially in this heat wave that we're having here, we want some added protection against the heat, and the wider mesh would definitely allow a little bit more air to pass through. So the netting, once we've done the frame, then what we need to do is put the lock-in channels on the frame, and we'll show you that in a picture and hope that we could see good enough to understand exactly what's happening. Once the profiles are on, then we use what we call a wriggle wire, and the wire is like zigzag. You just put it in place, and that really locks the netting into the wire. It does the same thing with the plastic as well. The wriggle wire allows you to dismantle, for want of words, the covering very, very easy. You pull one end and the whole thing just comes out, and the netting just drops right to the ground in the event that you have a pending storm. So the advantages, basically what we're looking at is maximum transmission of light, and the plastic on the roof allows us to do some water harvesting. And I think I've got a slide there. I took some pictures the other day. I think I've got a slide here to show you exactly how the water harvesting is done, because attached to the frame is some gutters. And so once you put the plastic on, the rain can't come through, so it slides off, and the water goes right into the gutters. From the gutters, you channel it through some 4-inch pipes and then into your holding tanks or cisterns or whatever catchment system that you have. There's some polycarbonate sheeting that can be used too, but for our purposes, we're not going to spend much time on that because they could be very expensive. And over time, they tend to change their color and thus kind of defeat the whole purpose of maximum light transmission and so on. Just an installation tip, I think I alluded to this, the plastic and the netting must be pulled as tight as possible to prevent any kind of sagging. Although the roof might be of gable or round roof, you still don't want to have any kind of sag in there, because that would give the wind a little bit of opportunity to undermine the plastic. And that plastic is in high winds, especially when you're installing it, it's almost like a big kite. So you want to be careful when you're installing that. You want to choose a day when the wind is really at its minimum. Because if you're up there and 6 of you holding that plastic and the wind get under it, it just take you up and take you for a nice little ride like a parachute. Except the parachute comes down, that goes up. All right? So these are different types of netting and shade cloth. On the top left, we have the 50, the anti-insect netting 50. And that's the one that I find is used more prominently in our region. The plastic shade net, I've seen people use that to the top of the greenhouse where right in the eave for ventilation purposes. I've seen that used on shade houses as well. The holes in there are much bigger. The disadvantage is, although you get some shade, it allows the entry of a lot of small insects, white flies, mealybugs, trips, aphids, you name it. So that's a little trade-off. On the bottom right, we have plastic shade net, 80. That's a little higher than the 50, but it won't, just like the 50, won't allow insects in, but that one, they provide a little bit of shade. On the top, that's shade cloth. Sometimes the shade cloth is used in tandem with the anti-insect netting, just to provide some shade when you need a little cooler space. So once you employ that shade, say midday down to 3 o'clock, then you could roll it back up and you're back to normal with the anti-insect netting underneath. But you just pull the shade down for when you need it. So that's something that you would use, roll it up when you don't want it, and let it come down when you need it. We spoke about the lock-in profile. And in this picture, what I attempted to do is show you exactly what the lock-in profile and the wriggle wire is. If you look at the picture to your left, you would see the hand hole in the left hand hole in the lock-in profile, and the netting is over the profile, and now the right hand is putting in the wriggle wire to secure it in place. If you look on the left-hand side, you would realize that that netting is already secured by the wriggle wire. And so that wriggle wire locks the netting inside the profile, and no matter what, you can't even pull it out. You would have to let go the wriggle wire with a sharp object and then pull it out. But if you pull on the netting, you could pull all day, it won't come out, how strong and well secured it is. Simple technique, but very, very effective. Let's talk a little bit about ventilation. I alluded to airflow. A lot of times we use natural ventilation because we have the trade winds blowing across. But sometimes, especially, and I keep going back to the heat wave. When we have this massive heat wave, we may have to introduce some kind of forced ventilation. The use of fans, a lot of times is very important. We started to install fans in our greenhouse here because we are understanding that the heat wave would go down to the end of November, and that is really causing some havoc for us. Our production has been down compared to what it would have been if the place was cooler. So the forced ventilation, spoke about the fans, vents, and that's shade cloth that we saw earlier, the plastic shade net that when you have the A-shaped type roof or even the half moon roof, that can be used to the end where the actual roof meets the uprights, and that would allow better airflow. On that height, you really don't have to worry about small insects because they usually don't go above 10 feet. The shade cloth, like we alluded to, I've been experimenting as well with a misting system in tandem with a fan. So you got some jets, some PVC pipes, you run them in the top of the greenhouse. And once you turn the pipes on, you've got these misting jets that the mist just comes out. It's just regular water, but the jets are so fine that it forces a mist. And then to work with that, to make it even better, you turn the fans on and the fans would just blow the air, and that would in turn cool the system down. We spoke about electricity, and I mentioned that you need electricity for irrigation to run the pumps. You ideally, a solar system would work well because it's renewable energy and you wouldn't have that monthly cost associated with it. But like anything else, is startup cost. It adds to the startup costs. So maybe you would want to start with electricity if it's available in your area. If not, you're forced to use solar. And then when you get yourself sorted out and start making some real money, then you could switch over to a solar system. Now, lighting is a good thing to have. Aids with your security, and sometimes, I mean, at home we do all the seeds and look after the seedlings in the evening time. So that's where electricity comes in as well. Security cameras, they need some kind of power. Even the security cameras, something else, those are three on the top, but I'll get back to that. But I'm just showing you that, you need some kind of electricity. Oh, yeah, you have people on your farm and sometimes lunchtime, they would like to add some heat to their food. The use of a microwave, use of radios, you need electricity for these kind of things. This slide depicts a greenhouse with some mechanical ventilation. I took some pictures this morning, but when I started putting my slides together, they weren't the best, so I really didn't want to put them up on your screen. But this one is not in use, obviously. But just to put it up there to show you what the fans are like in the greenhouse. Electricity again, and this is what we call forced ventilation. Once the fans are on, they move the air around, and sometimes there's some vents, and we force the hot air out of the greenhouse. Okay. While I have this picture here, I think it's important to talk about the trellising system, because this one shows the pipes going across from left to right in the roof. And so to install a trellis system, a similar cable as what they use for electricity on the poles, you would get a cable and you would attach it to one end of the horizontal pipe that goes across the top of the roof and run it over each horizontal pipe going from one end to the next, and then secure it to the back. You will pull it very, very tight before you secure it. Because what would happen is that when you're going to trellis the cucumbers tomatoes, and bell peppers, then you would run a string from the plant itself up to that cable. So each plant would have their own string attaching to the cable, and that would be your trellising system. Let's talk a little bit about environmental control systems. Sometimes more sophisticated greenhouses, you have what they call evaporative coolers, wet walls, sometimes exhaust fans, regular fans like we just mentioned. And those are to help cool down the greenhouse in very hot times. Most of the greenhouses, though, are naturally vented, but we now see where we are forced because of the climate change to look at ways to mitigate against these heat, even in the greenhouse and even with shade cloth. So yes, the cooling systems is one of the things that we're looking at as well. We've employed fans already and now experimenting with the misting system. Monitors, what we're looking at right in the center of the screen is an irrigation timer. So we got irrigation timers, very, very important. When we talk about irrigation system, I'll elaborate more on that. We have moisture meters, and that moisture meter would basically tell you how much moisture is in the soil at any given time. And so you could set your irrigation accordingly. Humidity, thermostats, these are things that would be employed inside the system so that you know exactly what's happening there all the time. I've seen the FAO have some equipment, and there's an app that you could hook up on your phone so that at any given time, no matter where you are, you could know what the temperature is, you could know what the humidity is, you could know what the soil moisture is. So if you want to run an extra irrigation cycle, you could use that app and initiate that irrigation cycle and determine how long it's going to run for and all of that. So the technology is getting a little bit more sophisticated, and so farming is definitely on its is moving with the technology as well. Yeah, we mentioned a little bit earlier about water and irrigation. And so I mentioned that the size of the greenhouse and the size of your operation is very dependent on the availability of water on a year-round basis. Otherwise, you will have an investment that is just sitting there and not bringing proper returns. If you have land in an area where there's no water, before you do anything, you have to make provisions for water. Whether you're going to dig a pond, line it with a pond liner, and catch water when rain fall, or when you do the greenhouse, you're going to have some kind of water harvesting from the roof into that pond, and then you use the water as per needed. But water has to be one of the determining factors where you establish this greenhouse and the size of the greenhouse. You can't go and build something and the demand for water is 3 times the availability of water. Can't make sense. The types of irrigation systems. We employ a lot of drip irrigation and hydroponics. Now, drip irrigation, as was mentioned in the last session, you would cut down on watering per plant, per square meter, however we want to look at it. But 90% less water with the drip irrigation inside of the greenhouse than outside, because largely because you don't have the amount of evaporation and you're just not watering a large portion of soil. And I would show you, just give me 1 second here. Because could everybody see my hand?
Yes.
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
All right. So what I have here, and let me use this one. This one is probably easier. What I have here is what we call a drip peg. And the drip peg is connected to microtubing. The microtubing is connected to the drip hose. There is what we call an emitter, this round thing right here. That's the emitter. And so this drip hose here now, this is a shutoff valve, is connected to a pipeline, and that we call the submain. And so what happens is that the drip peg go right to the root zone of the plant. So the water is, or the nutrients is delivered right where the plant needs it. So there's really hardly any excess nutrients or water being administered to the plant. So it's almost like precision watering. The moisture meter allows you to figure out over time how much water that plant needs. And so we use the technology to limit or cut down on the amount of water that we use inside the greenhouse. Over time, when you're working with the plants inside the greenhouse, you become familiar with how much water the plant uses at different stages. So for example, when we plant lettuce seedlings, they might be 3 weeks old. We plant them from the seedling stage, and then we take them to what we call the production house, inside the greenhouse. Those timers are set for the first week to about 3 minutes, and 3 minutes 4 times a day. And you hardly get any moisture leaking out of the pot, because that is just what the plant needs for that particular stage and that period of time. So for example, 8 o'clock, the timer would come on for 3 minutes. 10 o'clock, it would come on for another 3 minutes. 12 o'clock, another 3 minutes, and then 2 o'clock for another 3 minutes. And that is enough water for the plant for the entire day. Now, I spoke a little bit about the emitter. What the emitter does is it controls the flow of the water. So the different colors signify the different flow rates. So the black emitter would give you 1 gallon of water dripping through that emitter every hour. The brown emitter would pass through a half a gallon every hour. So you know exactly how much water, you can calculate how much water that plant get with the duration of time based on the different emitters that you have there. All right. So plants such as cucumber, as opposed to the lettuce, usually we would use a 1 gallon per hour emitter, such that even if you water for 5 minutes, you get more water using the 1 gallon per minute emitter than if you were using a half a gallon emitter. Because to get the same amount of water, that half a gallon emitter would have to run for twice as long. Everybody following? I hope so. And then, yeah, so these are some of the systems that we could employ in the greenhouse to make life easier. The watering is one of the things that I like. Once you get the irrigation right, then you really don't have to worry about it. And so you don't have to go around watering plants. You still have to do your checks, mind. And one thing I would urge once I'm at it is, once you've got your irrigation system in place, you flush your lines at least once a week, because we know that especially if we're getting water besides the rainwater that we harvest, The water coming from the city mains or the government pipes have a lot of chlorine and additives in them. Very hard water. And sometimes the sediments tend to clog up our drip lines and emitters. So once you flush your systems, you just open the end and let straight water run through. And that normally flushes them out. Once you do it regularly, on a weekly basis, you really don't have too much of an issue. Watering, overwatering and underwatering, real problems. None better than none. Both of them put stress on the plants. So we want to give the plants just the right amount of water. We don't want to have root rots and so on. Okay? We mentioned the drip system, drip irrigation, and the hydroponics. The hydroponics is even more efficient than the drip irrigation when it comes to water conservation, because what happens is that the water recycles and the plant just takes as much as it wants and you just keep recycling. But that water is filled with all the nutrients that the plant needs. So there's the nitrogen, there's calcium, there's phosphorus, there's potassium, there's all the nutrients in that water-based solution that the plant needs. So proper irrigation system should be installed with filters, shut-off valves, pump, microtubing emitters, and so on. Been through that when I demonstrated how the drip line is basically set up. Rainwater harvesting, I think this is very important. All of the structures that we have are fitted with gutters, and those gutters are hooked up to pipes, and those pipes take the water into some big tanks that are capable of holding 1,000 gallons each. You know, and there's a lot of benefits to it. There's really no substitute for rainwater. If you realize that you're watering your garden and the plants not seem to be growing, as soon as the rain comes, they just take off, you know? So, and over time, to me, once you've set up your water harvesting, it's minimal cost. But you must install your gutters and your catchment and keep them clean. Let me show you what I'm talking about. All right, this is on the left-hand side. If you look at the top, you would see the gutters on the greenhouse. So the water comes off the plastic straight into the gutter. The picture on the left shows that the big pipes, these are 4-inch pipes, they're hooked up directly to the gutters and into the 1,000-gallon tanks. These tanks are cascaded, joined together, such that if one is filled, then water just runs in the next one. Okay? We went through the irrigation, but just so that you have a greater appreciation, you must have a water source. And the water source sometimes will have the nutrients built or be a part of it. Once you've left your water source, you want some kind of screening filter because you don't want any impurities reaching the pump. Once you leave the pump, then you go through what we call a distribution line. Usually it's about 1 inch. Previous lines that we use, we started using some black. When we started, we had these black hoses, but sometimes what happens is that the fittings don't fit 100%, and we used to get leak, and I just moved away from that. From the return side, from the distribution line from the pump, put in another, put a shut-off valve. After the shut-off valve, or before the shut-off valve, you need another screen filter in there. Then you have your timers. Then you come off of the submain with the actual drip line I showed you. That drip line would have an individual shut-off valve. It would have the emitters, it would have the microtubing, and it would have the drip peg. Picture on the right basically shows you the white pipe is a PVC pipe. You've attached the drip hose to that. You could look and see the green shut-off valve, the microtubing, and then each pot with soil would have that drip peg in there, so the water go right to the plant root. Let's talk a little bit about seed selection, because like I said initially, it doesn't make sense to just talk about the construction and don't talk about what's inside the greenhouse. So we've got the greenhouse up, we've put the irrigation in, it's time for planting. We have to make sure that we select the right media and the right spacing when it comes to planting. The crop that we're planting, the seed selection have to be spot on, because we want to maximize the production inside that greenhouse. Now, we spoke about tomatoes and some of the crops that we grow successfully inside of the greenhouse. Remember, I was saying that there are two main types of tomatoes. There's the indeterminate type, and that's the type that you would want to grow in the greenhouse. Or if you can't remember indeterminate, just ask for greenhouse seeds. The one that we grow outside is determinate. It would fruit, and you would pick from maybe 2-3 pickings, and then that's it. But the indeterminate inside the greenhouse would go anywhere, with good management, anywhere from 6 months almost to a year. I can't say that for sure in this kind of heat, but we're lucky if you could get 6 months out of them. And you need to buy your seed. Sorry?
Excuse me, Mr. Trust. Can
Yeah.
everybody hear Mr. Trust? If you
Yes.
can.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
Okay.
I can hear it.
Yes, I can.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you. Thank you,
sure.
guys.
Beautiful,
Mr.
thanks for that.
Trust, continue.
So we need to buy seeds from reputable companies. Last night I gave 2, which was Paramount Seeds and Johnny Seeds. Those are 2 reputable seeds companies, especially when it comes to greenhouse seed production. The growing media, we have the natural one, which is soil. We've got these grow bags if you're going to do hydroponics. And we have the hydroponics channel, which is just water. In terms of hydroponics media, you got perlite, the coconut hucks, what we refer to, that in the literature you might see coconut coir, COIR. All of these things can be used as growing media. Now, the plant spacing, you have to make sure that whatever you're planting is adequately spaced. I could tell you from our experiences, when we're planting in pots, we use 2-gallon pots. And for the lettuce, we employ a kissing method to the pots, meaning each pot is resting against the other pot. So that's the spacing that we use. Now, when we're planting cucumbers, tomatoes, and bell peppers, we need a little bit more space. So we go 1.5, meaning the space that we leave between 2 pots is about half a pot space. All right? So from one cucumber plant to the next, we might have 18 inches between them. And that is adequate enough because these plants would be chaliced. And once we chalice the plants, we prune and we cut off all the side shoots such that we don't have crowding between the plants. We have adequate space for airflow, and airflow is very important. The other thing we do with the cucumbers is that once we start reaping cucumbers, we cut off all the leaves up to the other cucumber that is coming out. So we might Once we pick the first 2 cucumbers, then we cut off all the leaves below that, below the 3rd cucumber. And that allows proper airflow. And we do that a couple of times throughout the growth of the plant, such that we go up maybe about 6 feet. And then we allow the cucumber to do whatever it wants after that. Okay? So plant spacing, very important. I took this picture this afternoon because I think it's important to show you the different stages when it comes to the seedlings. So we have a rotation going that twice per week we do lettuce, because we sow anywhere between 1,500 and 2,000 lettuce seeds every week, depending on the market demand. So we would sow lettuce twice per week, on Sundays and on Thursdays. So we do half on Sundays and half on Thursdays, and we rotate. So what happens now is we reap on a Monday, lettuce that is, and we reap on a Friday. And as soon as we reap, we clean those pots up and the seedlings are ready, back inside there. Friday, same thing. Cucumbers, the life of the cucumber is much longer. So what happens there, the rotation is, as soon as we start to pick cucumber off of the plants, then it's time to set some seeds, because cucumber takes about 6 weeks to start to produce, so that you could pick the first fruit, and they would fruit for another 6 to 8 weeks, no problem at all. So that is the rotation there. So you would have to work out the life cycle of the plant and do your rotation accordingly. I came up with some challenges that I've experienced over the years, and some common issues. The cost of constructing and installation of a greenhouse can be prohibitive. You need technical expertise to get it done right. High cost of inputs, because even the seeds are more expensive than the seeds that you would use outdoors. But one thing I could tell you here is that the production is a lot higher. So it really sells itself. For example, some of the cucumber seeds that you would buy for inside the greenhouse might cost you $1 US per seed. Not $1 US, $1 EC per seed, sorry. But that said plant would produce anyway, once you do your proper maintenance and so on, would produce in excess of 10 pounds up. In Nevis, greenhouse cucumbers wholesale at $3 per pound. They retail at $4 per pound. Do the math. You can't go wrong at all. You spend $1 plus your maintenance, and you get $40 from the said plant. So it's a trade-off, but the math really work out. Pests and diseases. You've got rodents, you've got whiteflies, you've got mealybugs, so you got to manage against these kind of things. And once you do the right thing, then you keep them down to a minimum, because they won't get in unless you allow them inside. Climate control, droughts and the hurricanes. Hurricanes we got really no control over, such as drought, but we have to find ways to mitigate against them. What we find here in the Caribbean is that we've got, especially when it comes to farming, some unreliable workforce. The way I mitigate against that, I try to pay my guys what they would get as a laborer, at least out there in the construction field. All right, water shortages, that's another issue with the long droughts and so on. And so we have to be minded that we have to have some kind of system to store water for our greenhouses, because where you could buy some time outdoors, you can't buy time in the greenhouse environment. 2 days without water and that's it. The crop is gone. Education. These are some of the solutions. We have to educate ourselves, do a lot of research. The computer is in everybody's palm of hand, sometimes 24/7. So we got to utilize it for our own good and not for gossiping. Good agricultural practices. There's a course by Bayer, that's B-A-Y-E-R, on good agricultural practices. Could just go on the net and find that. It's free and it's very, very good. That was one of the first courses that I did way back when. Practice integrated pest management. When you're talking about pests, is a whole system, and I think that Mishka would have gone through that with you guys, or will be going through that with you guys. I'm not quite sure how the courses are running. Adequate maintenance and management with building and plant alike. When you see something going wrong, a tear in the net, fix it right away. Tear in the plastic, you fix it right away. Don't let anything slide. Around the greenhouse, you have to keep it clean and free of weeds. You cut your grass on a regular basis because these are things that attract insects and rodents and all of that. Marketing, you must be able to sell your produce and you must be able to keep proper records, because when you go to the bank later on to establish or to extend your establishment, they need to see some proof that you could pay them back. Water harvesting, like I alluded to earlier, is very, very important, and you have to secure your property. Structure management, I think I just went ahead of myself and deal with that, but cleanliness is paramount. You have to keep the surroundings clear, clean, and it's food you're dealing with. And usually in the greenhouse, it's from farm to table, really. So cleanliness is of paramount importance. We spoke about the repair of the structure. Replace rotted components over time, because these channel locks are in the weather, the regular wire, they will rot over time. Be vigilant and change them, because if a storm comes and they're already weak, they'll take them out and then take your structure down. Inspect, repair, replace trellis systems as required. Keep surroundings clean, like I said, of weeds and grass and anything in close proximity. You got to get rid of them. This is a tough one. We know it's coming and we know they will come, but what do we do? Well, first thing we do is spray, and the last thing we do is spray. But in the meantime, we would have to lower all plants that are on trellis, remove the regular wire from the lock-in profile, and we take the netting down. Usually we would leave the plastic up. The idea is once the netting comes down, the plastic is secure, and the wind would pass through and leave the roof and the structure intact once it's properly set in place. So that's why I was saying that it's very, very important that we do it and we do it right. Don't cut any corners. Once you get the netting down, then either take it to a safe place, put some big stone on it, cover it with soil, do something. But you want to make sure that it's going to be there when you come back a couple of days after. Move to potted plants to a shelter. It's easier said than done. Not going to kid you with that one. But this is important. Disconnect and store all solar panels, pumps in a safe place. Shut off all the electricity mains, all of the water mains, remove all small objects and so on. And like I say, get on your knees and pray that the storm is somehow diverted and we survive. We spoke about the benefits of the farming inside the greenhouse earlier, but I just thought it's important to reiterate that we get higher yields and quality. That's a shot from A1 Farms, complement A1 Farms. Those are the Dutch/English cucumbers I was talking about. Those ones grow up to about 12 inches long. Other benefit is we got the extended growing season where we could potentially farm all year round. We could have different crops in the greenhouse. I've grown lettuce and cucumber. I've grown lettuce, kale, leafy greens really in one house, and then put the bigger crops in the next house. If you have both in there, you got to make sure that one doesn't shelter the other. In the greenhouse, we mitigate against pests and diseases, but just the sheer material. But we have to be mindful that when we go out in the field, we don't bring back the eggs and or insects inside. It's less labor intensive because we really don't have to physically go on water. All of that is done automatically for us. It's a much cleaner environment. And so you could go to work clean and come back home clean, although you're doing farming. So it's a sexy way of farming, really. I want to leave some time for questions because I know there's lots out there. And so I just want to say, we're supposed to realize by now that farming provides an opportunity for us, the greenhouse provides an opportunity for us to farm all year round. However, we need proper planning, proper construction, regular maintenance of the greenhouse. That is of paramount importance to the success, not only of the structure, but the production and the well-being of us as farmers. Important things: water harvesting, efficient irrigation, specialized plant care. Plants in the greenhouse are like babies, people. We got to look after them. We got to care them. We got to nurture them. We got to talk to them. And once we do all of that, then we will get good quality and quantity. And the plants would smile back at us. Farmers, we must continuously keep abreast of technology, trends, and the development relating to the greenhouse farming to maximize our profits. Having said all of that, I want to thank you for your attention, and I want to say that we should have and will have a robust discussion because this is a real exciting and interesting topics. Madam Moderator.
Thank you. Okay, we have a few questions in the chat. Maureen, is there a control mechanism that, is there a control mechanism that can measure the amount of water be used on the plant to stop overwatering or underwatering?
Yeah, remember I spoke about the moisture meter, and that basically would measure the amount of moisture inside especially if you're using soil, in the soil at any given time. So once you know what that is, then you could regulate your water output to make sure that the plant doesn't get too much water or not enough water. Usually there is, you can eyeball it, but there are instruments out there too, like the moisture meter. What we did successfully at A1 is just monitor, set your timer, and then monitor how much water goes into that individual pot. Because remember, you would see the lettuce here. And if you look closely, especially to the second row to the left, that's a romaine lettuce, you'd see the drip peg inside the pot. And so what we were doing is setting the timer such that the first little drip we see coming out of the bottom of the pot, then we shut the timer off. So for example, if we set the timer for 5 minutes to come on at 2-hour intervals, and on the first 5 minutes, we realize that, hey, we're getting a drip. Then we scale it back to 4, because in 2 hours, there would still be moisture in the pot. And so if you let it go for that 5 minutes, then you would have water leaking out of the pot. And that way, you'd be getting a little too much water. That's not enough to give you any kind of root rot or anything, but you want efficient use of your water and nutrients. You don't want any wastage. So that's one way. But you could have moisture meters that you could put into the soil to tell you how much moisture is in there, when you should water and when not to water. Okay?
Okay, thank you. Kathy, you have a question?
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Kathy.
I might have missed it. I came in late, but just a question. For those of us who might not be able, because being in the industry with materials and so, pipe is expensive. It's more costly than lumber. Now, bear in mind, the treated lumber is expensive, meaning because it's treated. Now, would you advise someone to use treated lumber in replacement of some of the, like the structure of the greenhouse?
Of
Would
course,
you advise, right? But okay, so with that being yes, now remember the lumber is treated. Would the chemical that treat the lumber affect the plants?
not at all.
Because,
And
okay,
what you would do, what you would do is, although the lumber is treated, you would paint it,
mhm,
because when you paint it, you're giving it an extra protection and a longer life. I've seen they use that hardwood come from Guyana. I've seen
mhm.
that used in the greenhouse environment, and it has stand up for years upon years.
That's the
So
green
there's,
hat.
yeah, it's a little
Right.
bit more
Okay.
expensive, but there's
Yes,
really
it
no
is.
challenge with treated lumber. Let me tell you, Kathy, in my yard here, when I started out, I was doing some experiments, and the structure is still there from since 2010. I built that structure out of 2x4s, and it's still standing. I use it as a storeroom as we speak. Yep.
Okay. I
Yep.
just asked the question because I know in building, when you use treated lumber, especially with cupboards and so forth, they don't advise you to do that because of the chemical that is stored within the lumber itself. You know, it's not good for way food, like cupboards and so. So that's
But
why I
if
asked when it comes to the
even
plant.
even so, once you paint that treated lumber, there should be no issue with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
Yeah, so
that's a good choice, because
mm-hmm.
there's a few expats here in Nevis who have had us construct the rustic look greenhouse from lumber. They want a
Mm-hmm.
rustic look, and it's lumber we use, 2x4s, 2x6. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Just paint
Right,
it,
right.
and away you go. No trouble at all.
Thank you.
Yeah. You can even use bamboo if there's enough.
Thank you very much.
No problem, Kathy.
We have a question from Decima. I may have missed it, but can you successfully grow root crops in a greenhouse? If so, what are the challenges? I noted that more emphasis is placed on veggies.
Yeah, root crops can be grown. I could think of carrots. I could think of beets, but the emphasis is placed on veggies for the simple reason that you want to maximize your return. Veggies are quick turnaround and give you high value. So, for example, lettuce, 42 days from seed. Kale, about 40 to 45 days from seed. And so you want to maximize your return. And that's why we tend to do more leafy greens than any other crop inside the greenhouse. Beets aren't too bad. Carrots aren't too bad either. But they don't give you that high cash value as you would get from leafy greens and vegetables. Even scallions and so on is very, very good to grow inside there. Spinach, for those of us who like a lot of greens, callaloo as well. I mean, I can't grow enough callaloo. A callaloo sells for about $6 a bunch here in Nevis. Lettuce, a romaine lettuce, I get up to $7 a head for lettuce on the local market. So, it's a business and you want to maximize profits. That's why you're in business. But if it's just in your backyard and you want to feed your family, sure. Carrots, beets, those are root crops that offer my top of my head, would do very good inside the greenhouse. Keep the questions coming, keep the conversation going, please.
What is the advantage of the plastic covering compared to the other covering?
Well, with the plastic, it's a good light diffuser, so you really don't get the excess heat inside there. Now, what the plastic really does, it allows you to harvest the water off the roof. It keeps the water out because it's an enclosed environment. You really don't want too much water inside there, especially if you're growing crops like tomatoes, bell peppers, and cucumbers. When you got a lot of moisture inside the greenhouse and excess moisture, it attracts fungal diseases. And that is not a good thing at all, because it undermines your production and your yield. Now, having said all of that, if you're running, if you're doing a shade house where you got netting on the top, lettuce is not a problem. Kale is not a problem. Scallions is not a problem. So it really depends on what you want to do. Then you decide what the usage is. But if you want to harvest water, if you want to grow a crop of cucumbers especially, you really want to cover that roof with plastic. Okay?
Should each plant have a moisture meter?
Not necessarily, because what happens here, remember we spoke about the emitters, and once you have the same emitter on a drip line, each pot or plant will get the same amount of water. So you just have to put them in strategic places so that one moisture meter could work for an entire crop. Because all you need is a sample, and that sample would guide the process. Because bear with me for a second. What would happen here is that one timer would control a good section of the irrigation in that greenhouse. For example, a full-size greenhouse, 30 by 100, more than likely would have only 2 timers in there. So what you would try to do is plant one section at a time. So that section that you plant here, all the crop for the most part would be planted at the same time. So they would get the same amount of nutrients at the same time. So the timer would be set for 3 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever the case is. And each emitter would deliver exactly the same amount of water to that plant. So you really don't have to have a moisture meter in each pot. No.
Where do you purchase your commercial greenhouse?
From the US, there's a company, there's a few companies that I deal with, but there's one of them called B&K Installations. They're in South Miami. I've got a very good relationship with them. I've been dealing with them for years. And so I get some good prices, and the guys work with me. So make a note of that, B&K Installations.
Next question. I wanted to know if there was any issues with monkeys attacking greenhouses to get at the crops.
Fortunately, we haven't experienced any intrusion of monkeys when it comes to the greenhouse. They're all over Nevis, but I haven't heard one report of monkeys trying to penetrate the greenhouse or trying to get inside for any reason. So we're keeping fingers crossed, hoping that we could keep them away from the greenhouse. And that is one of the things why the greenhouse and the shade house is so attractive now, because There's so many monkeys, insect kits and nevis that we have to find mitigating ways to farm.
Robertina, you have a question?
Good evening, all. Yes, I do.
Good evening.
Mr. Strauss. I
Good
have
evening.
a question. Do you practice crop rotation in your greenhouse? And if you do, what
Yeah.
exactly is your strategy?
Well, let me put it this way. Crop rotation is always encouraged, whether in greenhouses or outdoors. Because if you're doing hydroponics, it's really not a problem. Because the plants are fed from nutrients all the time. Once you're planting in soil, it's advised that you rotate the crops. Short crops like lettuce, I would plant lettuce for straight 6 months, maybe up to a year, without switching to another greenhouse, because the root structure of the lettuce is so shallow that we really don't have a problem with growing them all year round in one greenhouse at all. Cucumbers and peppers and tomatoes, we switch them maybe every crop, because these are, well, not cucumbers, tomatoes and peppers. These are longer term crops. And sometimes if we don't switch, what we do is that we add manure to the soil in the pots. Maybe just those garden shovel, 1 scoop of that, of rabbit manure or cured manure from the goat pen, and we just add it there and we're good to go. Crop rotation is always, always, always encouraged as much as possible.
Next question. Can you plant directly in the soil instead of pots?
You can plant directly in the soil, but then you don't have as much control. In the pots, you have the soil confined to that one particular crop. So, for example, if you have any type of microorganisms working against you, like nematodes, well, that's not a microorganism, but nematodes or any infestation of that particular soil, you could easily take that one pot out and replace it. I've seen people do banks in the greenhouse and plant directly into the soil. When you're doing that, you use a little bit more water. You still have to do some weeding inside there. It's just not as clean an environment as you would have if you plant in pots, but there's nothing at all wrong with direct planting in soil inside the greenhouse.
How long do you think is the time span for a greenhouse?
In terms of the structure itself? The
Kathy?
structure.
Go
Kathy,
ahead.
just some clarification in terms of the structure itself, Kathy.
Yes, yes, that's what I'm saying. How long do you think it would last?
Okay.
The structure itself. The structure
All right.
itself.
Beautiful. I commissioned my first greenhouse, the commercial ones, the first one in 2013, January 2013. I rebuilt this from up to this morning. Same structure. All we did was change the plastic on the roof. We changed the plastic on the roof twice. Yeah, we still have the same netting, although it's time for change. But we still have the same netting for the most part. But the structure is fully much intact. We have changed some of the profile and wriggle wire and the plastic, but the uprights, the piping, and everything is still intact.
Right, that's what I was thinking with the plastic, especially because I know those things with the sun and rain, leaving something outside, the time span on those would not have a last, like a long
Right.
time.
Well, let me put it this way. The manufacturer warrants the plastic for 4 years. But
Okay.
I've had plastic in play and in use for up to 7-8 years. Same plastic.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any question on the irrigation? Everybody's comfortable with the irrigation side of it? Like I said, I don't expect you to leave here and start to build a greenhouse by yourself tomorrow. But if someone is doing it for you, then you should have pretty good understanding of the process, the procedure, and at least be able to plan it out on paper and then ask the pertinent questions so that you don't get shortchanged.
We have one more question in the chat.
Mhm.
Is it healthier to plant veggies like lettuce, parsley, etc. in old tires?
Oh yeah, there's really nothing wrong with planting in tires. I've seen that. As a matter of fact, I've seen people putting tires in the shade houses, put soil in them, and plant ginger, and the yield would blow your mind. Some really, really good ginger. I've seen them do scallions like that as well. Yeah, really, really good. So no issues there. Oh, and I'm glad you say it because parsley is one of the crops that we've done successfully in the greenhouse as well. Parsley and Swiss chard. Yep, really good. And those, give you returns very, very quick as well. But the Swiss chard, the hotels and the high-end restaurants really step up to the plate when it comes to those. They like the color, the different color. Mix it in with the salad, with the lettuce, give it nice color on that. And yeah, so these are just ideas, crops that you could do. I mean, even in your backyard, if you have enough space and you put down something 10 by 20 and you decide to put herbs, scallions in there, you could make a mint. You would have enough to take to them, especially if you're in an area where they don't mind you selling it without the bulbs. You cut off the scallion maybe about 1.5 inches, 2 inches up from the bulb, and you package it, rubber band, and you sell it. And you go back in the next 2-3 weeks and you're able to cut the same one off again. And you just go like that. So there's endless of opportunities, even in small spaces. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be like the commercial scale one, because remember the first slide? That was the Elizabeth Pemberton Primary School. And except for the covering, I got all the piping from local hardware store. Because what we did, we used the tubings, the 1x2s and the 2x4 metal pipes. We used the 2x4 in the corners and in the center. And that was it. Yeah. That was it. But it's very important, even if you're not gonna do a proper footing all the way around, it's very important to cement, concrete, the uprights, the corner uprights must be solid because they're the real strength of the building. If you're gonna do a commercial structure, if you're gonna spend that money, might as well you do it and do it right. Because even if a hurricane comes and you lose your plastic and your netting and your frame is still intact, say your prayers, thank God, and you move on again. But if you lose your structure, that is where the real dollars gone. Because the labor cost to buy them back and the labor cost to put them back in place and the time, you lose a lot of time. And in this environment, in 6 weeks, you could have money. So if you're out 6 weeks, yeah, It's not good. Yeah.
Okay, Anne Marie, you have
I
a
have a
question?
question.
Okay,
Go right ahead.
I have this is Val Thompson. I have a question, Maki, concerning the timers.
Uh-huh.
I heard you say something about you can set the timers for different times during the day for
Whatever duration you
whatever
want.
period. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I have some timers at different sections of my yard. And I have a feeling I probably have them set up wrongly because I have them set up for like maybe once. I have those with the two outlets and those with the one outlet. And those with the two outlets, they come on twice per day, the same time, AM and PM. But I'd
Yeah.
like to be able to set them up. Now that I've heard you say that they could be set up different times of the day for different durations,
Mhm.
I'd like to be able to set up mine the same way because during this heat, I'd like for them to get water like midday.
What make are they?
The same as what you just displayed there.
Okay. Well then, yeah, that's possible. I think it's just a matter of programming them properly.
Yeah, I have to look for the instructions now.
Yeah. Look for the instructions, and if you need some help, you know where to find me.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. All
Nice
right, dear.
teacher,
Bye-bye.
Val. Yeah.
Yep.
Anne
Thank
Marie,
you.
sorry, Val. Anne
Oh,
Marie,
that's
you
okay.
have your hands up.
Anne Marie, I'm waiting. Anne Marie don't want to talk to us tonight.
Apparently not. Okay, we have something from Maureen. I think I will need all of your details when I am starting to build my greenhouse. I will need all of your input. Would you mind a personal call?
Not a problem. That's why I'm here. I share all the knowledge I have every chance I have.
Okay, guys, do we have any more questions?
Mine is not so much a question. Mine is just to add where the tires are concerned. I look at the tires as a way of controlling whatever you decide to put in it. Because I plant stuff in tires. I have my herbs and so forth in the tires. I have my mint and those things in the tires as well. So
Beautiful.
for me, yeah, that's for me, that is a way of controlling because even sometimes you would put a plant inside of it. And if it was outside, as you were saying, the space in the greenhouse, you wouldn't have no control over it. But in the tires, now the tires kind of just control that space.
Yeah,
So you
it's
don't,
confined to the tire.
yes,
So
exactly. So
if
it's not a bad, it's good.
yeah, if you realize if you get a big truck tire, you could
Yep,
even plant potatoes in that.
yep.
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
have saffron in my tires.
Have what,
I
sorry?
have saffron, which is turmeric.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I have
Remember I said
turmeric. Yep.
it's similar to the ginger. I
Yes.
was pleasantly surprised when I saw the outcome of the ginger crop.
Mm-hmm.
One
Yes.
question again. I have a concern about the toxins that would come from the tire. Because with watering and degradation and all that, wouldn't the toxins in the tire leach into the earth and consequently into the plant?
Well, I really haven't had that issue raised at all. So I haven't done any research in that area. I really don't know. That is something that never even crossed my mind.
Yeah, I've seen some readings and videos where people are discouraged from using tires,
for planting?
I would love to use tires, you know, but I'm trying to be as organic as I can, even though
Mhm.
we're in a small island state, and what happens in the neighbor's yard
Affects you.
could impact, you know.
Yeah,
So I stay away from the tires,
okay.
really.
I really haven't even thought about that, to be quite honest with you. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, to each his own.
Mhm.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, we have Cynthia.
Good evening,
Hi, Cynthia.
everybody. Hi, Mr. Ross. Great job. Everything
you.
you've said there, I just wish I could win the lotto now to have my own greenhouse. I'm from St. Lucia. I worked with Labor Department and I had an opportunity to go to Canada to see how our farmers did in Canada, working in the greenhouses, but I never knew all of this has to be done. I was just concentrating how beautiful the fruits are and everything, but to maintain a greenhouse is expensive.
It
These
is.
are huge ones and they're air conditioned, well watered. Let me tell you, I've never seen tomatoes grow so high. They were huge and so many other things. But coming back home, I've retired and I have a little backyard. It's 10 years I'm living there, and my soil in one part of the ground, okay, grows all my green figs, macambu, plantain, very well. And the other side does not want to do anything. I started this pineapples on that same side, yes, but the right hand side refused to grow. So what I did, I put 3 long beds up, and I have chosen to plant lettuce, kale, and parsley. So I just bought some nice soil, everything else. The ground's not good on that side, so I decided to invest because I say I wanna go out there, maybe sell in my community, help young people to know how to. That's what I'm doing this right now, to grow what they eat.
Right.
So I want to know, how far can I put the kale and the lettuce? I have 3 beds, so this is what I want to do. They're about 10 feet long, the beds. I
The
decided to put that long.
Yeah, the kale and the lettuce could be spaced about a foot apart.
A foot apart.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, depending on the variety, you might even want to put it maybe a little tighter, but a foot apart is adequate because I don't know the variety and it might bunch a little bit.
Okay.
So 1 foot apart should be more than adequate.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I just got the little trays for me to put each of them in. So when they get big, I could transplant them to the beds.
Yeah,
And they're okay.
that would take you maybe about 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
2.5 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you monitor it. Lettuce and kale, they like a lot of water.
Okay.
Especially in this hot climate. I would advise that you water early in the morning and
Yes.
late in the afternoon.
Okay.
Yeah. Such that when the plant wakes up in the morning, it can just feed away before the sun comes up and before the mid-morning sun and the sun pull out all that moisture out of the soil.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
The other thing you can do once you're outdoors is use a lot of mulch around the plant root. Meaning it could be grass that you cut from the yard or
Yes.
leaves or anything like that.
Yes.
Yeah,
I have all that ready.
right. Well, you're on the right track.
Yes.
And yes, I remember those elaborate greenhouses in Canada. As a
Yes.
matter of fact, what I did was my job was I was a biomedical engineer, so I used to do a lot of travel.
Okay.
And going down to Leamington, which is just before Windsor.
That's right. I went
Right.
there.
Yep, that's where the Heinz ketchup plant is.
Yes.
And that was one of the things that drew me to the greenhouse environment because I realized that they were producing trailer loads, 40-foot container loads of tomatoes on a
Yes.
daily basis from these
Yes.
greenhouses. Yeah, and I said, listen, if they could do it in the winter time and summertime all year round,
Yes.
something must be nice about these greenhouses. But they're elaborate and they're very, very expensive.
Yes.
So what we have here in the Caribbean is I mean, we have the weather for the
Yes.
most part conducive to us. We don't have the very, very cold temperatures, so we get away without heating. But on the reverse side of it, we need to find mitigating ways to control this heat. And so that is my next area of concentration and research.
Yes.
So
All the
yeah.
best in that, and you let
Yeah,
us know.
thanks. Thanks,
Thank you
thanks.
so much, Mr. Joss.
No problem. I keep trying.
Okay, our last question for the night, Dolores.
Hi, Dolores.
Hi, good night.
Good night.
I noticed someone asked a question earlier. I don't remember hearing it answered, and I'm
Tell me.
also interested in it. Somebody
Sure.
asked if there were any issues with monkeys attacking the greenhouses to get at the crops. We have
yeah,
a
you
lot
prob-
of
Yeah, you
monkeys.
probably took a bathroom break, Dolores.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard any reports at all, whether in St. Kitts or Nevis, in regards to monkeys and attacking the greenhouses.
Oh,
I
okay.
mean, I'm here in Nevis and I'm surrounded with monkeys. Well, truth be told, where I live here, I'm bordered by two guts. Lots of trees, lots of mango trees, and the monkeys are here. And even well, I've got a solar panel fence, but that kind of keep them away. But when they do get in and jump over in the trees, I haven't seen them gone close to the greenhouse at all.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I think that's one of the reasons why some people are doing the smaller greenhouses or shade houses in the backyard as well, just to mitigate against the monkeys.
Yeah, I could understand that.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Where's your location?
In St. Kitts.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you have the same challenges down here as well.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, guys, if there's no more questions, I really enjoyed the two sessions with you. And I'm open. Feel free. Get my email, phone number. Just hit me up. If I can't answer right away, I promise I'll get back to you. So that's anything. If I don't know the answers, I'm always on my computer doing some research, and I've got a good network of people from FAO to IECA. So I've done lectures for FAO. I've got contacts with most reps around the region. So yeah, if I don't have the information to hand, I have the resources to get it. So not a problem at all. Nice. Adding another 100 and how much? Let me check. Another
126.
Another 126 sisters. Thanks, guys, and all the best with the rest of the sessions.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank
Josh.
you.
Thank you,
Oh my
thank you,
gosh.
thank you
You
so
enjoy
much.
the
Thank you
session.
Very
so
nice
much.
session.
Oh my gosh. It is worth me staying out
Amazing.
to listen to you. It
Mr.
is so
Trust,
worth it.
Very, very nice. Thank you so much.
Well,
Good
welcome.
night.
Good night.
I missed the choice.
Good night.
Well,
Good night.
good morning.
Thank
Yeah.
thank
you,
you,
Mr.
Mr.
Josh.
Trust, for the wealth of
Thank you.
knowledge you've
All
shared
right.
with us.
Thank you,
Very nice
Mr.
session, Mr. Josh.
Good night.
Thank
you.
you. Oh
Night.
my gosh. I'll definitely be getting in touch.
Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Good night. Good
Good
night.
Good
night.
morning. Good night.
Oh, good morning. Good morning in England. Yeah. Sleep well.
Good night, everyone. Bonsoir
Yeah.
tout le monde.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night.
Good
See you.
night.
Bye.
everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Trust, so much. It
Thank
was
you,
a
Madam
pleasure.
Moderator. Yeah. Thanks for your assistance. And I think it was two well-spent sessions. Yeah, I wish the ladies all the best. And feel free to share my contact because
Yes,
yeah.
I did share your email address on Tuesday
Phone
evening.
number. Yeah.
So
Share
expect
the
their
phone number as well.
emails.
Yeah, no trouble at all.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
And you're in
you
St.
again.
Lucia, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, well, next time I pass you, I'll have Keith then
Good
introduce me.
night. Hello. Hello.
Okay, no
Guys.
problem.
Okay.
Hello.
Good night.
Hello.
Hi,
Hi.
hello.
Hi, this is Katisha. I'm from St. Vincent. By some error, I was not in the previous sessions, but I really did enjoy tonight, and I hope I can make up for the sessions lost.
Uh,
So I was
Stay
just
tuned.
added this afternoon, this evening. Yeah.
I'm sure Madam Moderator would send you the recording. It
Yes.
may not do justice, but at least you'll have something.
Yes. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Okay. You as well.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Mr. Trust, good night.
Yes, my dear. Good night.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
Good night.
Good night.